Okay, hi. We will do jazz today. You will find this, of course, handout in your questions under your classwork also. So here we go. All right, now, talk about jazz. Actually, first we're going to tell Alex and Brock to have a seat and quit getting up running around the room. I have it on film now, so when I have to send them to the office, I got proof that I gave them grades. But the cup does not runneth over anymore. Okay. In fact, it has sprung a leak and gone. All right. Now, what is jazz?
Jazz is music.
Jazz is the original style of American music. Okay, it actually starts in America. It has a unique blend of many styles of music, including gospel, brass, African music, the blues, Spanish music. It kind of has a combination of all that stuff, okay? It incorporates musical notes that are what they call bent to create emotion in the music. Jazz bands can be unique in that they create rhythm from a wide variety of instruments, and the rhythms can shift and change throughout the song. In fact, we're going to talk about that. They used to, one of the most unique things about jazz was they would improvise, okay? This is when they would actually, as the music is being played during the song, okay, there's a structure to it, there's a melody to it, but then they would actually put that away, please. You don't need to have that in your hand. Put it up on top.
Yeah, Piper.
I keep preaching to them about how knowledge is power. Right over their head. Okay? So they actually would make up music as they were playing. Okay? But the musicians play it, but there was a structure to it, but they would play it differently every time. And usually each musician would get that opportunity to do a solo during the song. Okay? I'm getting ready to throw about half of this class out of here. They don't care, unfortunately, but that's fixing to happen. They really don't. It's amazing. It's amazing at the disrespect. And it's on film. That's the whole thing. I'm sitting here videoing this, and you're still just being as disrespectful as you can. And the sad part is, I don't think most of you realize that you're being disrespectful. And that's sad. That even makes it sadder. It really does. It's one thing to be disrespectful and understand that you're just being a jerk. It's another thing when you're being a jerk and you don't even realize it. Because that's just who you are. And that's just sad. It's incredibly sad. Okay. All right. Jazz was invented by African-American musicians in New Orleans. So it starts in New Orleans. In the late 1800s. Music became more popular in the 1900s. It takes the country by storm in the 1920s. And in the 1920s, the Center for Jazz actually moves from New Orleans to Chicago and New York City. Okay, but it started in New Orleans. Okay, jazz was so popular in the 1920s that time period is often referred to as the Jazz Age. There's also a time of Prohibition, if you remember. Selling alcohol was illegal, and during the Jazz Age, illegal clubs called speakeasies, we talked about those last week, were opened up all over the United States, and these clubs would feature jazz music, dancing, and of course they sold illegal alcohol. Yes?
This might be a bit off topic, but I got barked because I sent you something about prohibition through email, and I got barked because it was something about alcohol. My dad was like, wait, why are you talking about something about like alcohol? And I was like, no, it's prohibition. I didn't know
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, Miss Sizemore was teaching us that we got a little still set up in the classroom. And,
What you want to do is just add a little bit of that, and
all
it'll
right.
taste just right.
You flip
So-
over the cabinets and it's a
Now, the jazz age was a time when many jazz musicians and bands became famous. Okay, you had a number of rhythm bands, jazz bands. You had musicians like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. You can just bring that to me. That'd be fine.
you fill it out.
Thank you. That was mine. You're mistaken. Okay. Jazz continued to change and evolve over time. Okay, many new forms of music came from jazz. In the 1930s, swing music became very popular. It was played by large big bands, and people liked to dance to it. In the 1940s, a more complex instrumental-based version of jazz, referred to as bebop, developed. And later, jazz influenced new styles of music such as funk, rock and roll, hip-hop. All that has got roots in jazz music, okay? Some of the terms that they use, most of these are not around anymore, but occasionally you hear somebody use something, one of them, okay? An axe, you hear that sometimes. That's referred, actually in music, as the guitar. Okay, back in these days, it was a term for a musical instrument, but they've actually got guitars now that they refer to as an axe because of the shape.
Crib is still used.
The blow was a term for playing an instrument. Bread was money. That's still
Yeah,
used.
like do the dough.
A cat was a jazz musician.
Then you wouldn't go.
He was known as a cat, sometimes a cool cat.
Yeah,
He's a cat.
That's neat.
soul is a cat.
Chops was a way to describe someone who could play an instrument well.
This one's used.
Okay, a crib, and that is still used today. That is where they live or slept. Finger zinger was someone who could play very fast. To dig in the 20s, you don't hear that anymore. To dig something meant you understood it. Okay, you understood what they were saying. Help, HEP, was a term to describe someone that was cool. That kind of went out in the 50s, early 60s. A hot plate was a really good recording of a song. A Jake was a term that meant okay.
What?
A lid was a hat.
Yeah, that's used sometimes.
A rusty gate, if you remember, chops was a way to describe someone that could play well. A rusty gate was someone who was not that good. Think about what a rusty gate does. Okay, it squeaks, it makes horrible noises, it doesn't operate real well.
Maybe they used to be
Yeah.
used and they don't.
All right.
I'm not having fingers anymore.
Scanning
That's the finger.
was improving words to a song with nonsense syllables. A sideman was a member of the band, but not the leader. A skins player, you will hear this one sometime.
Skin of the drum.
That's a drummer. Yeah, he plays the skins. That's a drummer.
Ooh, I've heard
A tag is the end part of a song. Okay. Jazz bands would often play on steamboats traveling on the Mississippi River to entertain travelers. Typical jazz instruments included drums, guitars, pianos, saxophones, trumpets, clarinets, trombones, bass. Dances included the Charleston, the black bottom, the shimmy, and the trot. We will pull some of those up tomorrow and let you take a look at them. They're just fun to watch. Probably fun to attempt, but some of them easy, some of them not. The United States actually named April 30th as the official International Jazz Day. And you had a number of famous singers come out of the jazz age. Ella Fitzgerald, Leah Horne, Nat King Cole, Billie Holiday, and of course Louis Armstrong. all of those, we're going to pull up and listen to some of the music tomorrow. You got to understand what you're hearing, especially if I can find something where they're actually playing in maybe a nightclub or something. What you're hearing is actually them. And you're going to be amazed at, well, I don't know if you will be, you should be. What you hear is actually them. There's nothing, they don't have anything in the back, no machinery or anything back there that is adjusting the acoustic or making them sound better or anything. It's actually them. It's talent coming forth. By today's standards, you can take someone that can't sing well and make them a star because of all the ways that you can adjust everything. And I think up through the 50s and 60s, you just had a lot of very talented people. And I'm not saying we don't have talented people today. I'm just saying I think we have fallen into, I think it's fallen down because I think we rely on technology so much sometimes to assist us, which is not a bad thing.
Like sometimes, like when people use way too much, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, it does.
Like
It
half the
can
rap
sound bad.
songs.
Right. All right, now. I rest my case. All right, listen up. If you don't want to listen, the door's right back there. Okay? It doesn't bother me either way. If you want to go stand in the hallway, go right ahead. Okay, but you might have, if we got one person here that actually would like to hear this, we're going to be quiet and listen. Okay, it's that simple. We're going to talk about Louis Armstrong. He was one of the ones that we mentioned. I used to love to watch Louis Armstrong as a kid. He was just, he later on, he starts off playing the cornet, then he moves to the trumpet, and that's what he was famous for. And then he started singing.
Oh.
And his voice is one of those voices, it's kind of this gravelly voice.
It's so deep.
It's,
He's like the LSU football player.
He's not,
That's so true.
it's one of those things, he's not this smooth, elegant singer, but there's something about his voice that kind of draws you to it. I mean, it's just something about him. You just loved what he did. Yes, Morgan.
I watched a really old movie with him in it, and he did a song, and it was just it's so hard.
It's like
Love
so
it.
hard. Am I supposed to click forward? But like,
Okay.
it's good though.
Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was.
It's like.
All right.
It's like.
He was born August the 4th, 1901 in New Orleans. He died in 1971, July of 1971 in New York City. He was only 63 when he passed away. Actually, yeah, I guess he was right at 60.
Wait, what did he die from?
Heart attack. All right. Again, if you're going to talk when I am talking, the door is back there. I will escort you out if you would like, if you don't know who I'm talking about. Alex? He grew up in New Orleans, okay? He grew up very poor. He grew up in a poor section of the city that was nicknamed the Battleground. As a boy, life was tough for him. His dad wasn't around. His mother could not take care of him. He got kind of sent from grandparents to uncles and back and around some people to try to take care of him. I have no idea. I don't think so. I think he came from a pretty good sized family. One of his favorite things as a boy was to watch the local jazz musicians. He liked the horn, and he began to teach himself how to play a cornet. When he was about 12, he got in trouble with the law and got sent basically to an orphanage/juvenile detention center
What did he do?
in New Orleans. He fired a gun on New Year's Eve up into the air. Okay?
That's so bad.
Well, he's in a big city.
When a bullet comes down, it's going to hit somebody.
Get something.
That's like when people like fire.
Now, growing up in the 1900s, of course, he did have to deal with racism. During this time, there was racist laws in the state. They were called Jim Crow laws. And this law separates black people and white people and made it very difficult for black people to succeed in anything, no matter how talented they were. But Louis didn't let that stop him. He focused on his music and would one day become, of course, one of the most famous musicians in the world and travel the world. In his early teens, he was already a great horn player. He played in local New Orleans jazz bands. You had a guy named Joe Oliver, who was a leader of one of the bands, took Louis under his wings, if you would, and taught him the ropes of the musical industry. And Armstrong he played in various bands in New Orleans. Then he moved up to Chicago in 1922 and played in some bands up there. And of course, this is the Roaring Twenties are coming in, so jazz music is taking off. And then Chicago becomes the home to jazz, and Armstrong begins to make a name for himself as one of the best musicians around. And he develops a unique style, playing amazing solos that people love.
Is it true that the trumpets are solid gold?
I doubt it. It was way too much for him to hold up.
Yeah.
A few years later, he moved to New York and played in another band. And eventually he moves back to Chicago, and he actually starts his own band at that point in time. And he begins to sing. And he had a very unique sounding gravelly voice that people loved. He spent the 1930s touring around the world. And he often worked as a feature soloist in big bands. In the 1940s, he formed a small jazz band called the All-Stars. And he had many famous jazz musicians would come and play with them. And he toured with them for the rest of his career. He had a number of hit songs throughout his career. Some of these, What a Wonderful World. Yeah, you probably heard that one. Hello, Dolly, West End Blues, Heebie Jeebies. Okay, that was one that he actually starts what they call scanning or scatting when he doesn't. You would just make up sounds, basically, to go with the music. It wasn't actually words. It was just this sound. I mean, and it was. But people loved it. They say here that he started that. The recording was partially a mistake because his sheet music fell on the floor, and he began just to making up words, and it sounded so good that they decided to keep it on the record, and it became a hit. Okay. But you got to understand, this is a guy that grew up poor. He didn't really have any formal education, but he grew up to write several books. He was in a number of movies. Okay, so he did a lot of stuff. He had 11 of his recordings has been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. The main airport down in New Orleans was named after him. He had 19 top 10 songs. Okay.
Wait, how many top 10 songs are there?
19.
What? Your mom.
What?
Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is 6 foot.
All right. Well, I hope y'all found that somewhat interesting, and we will talk to you later.